She never came home and no one noticed. It was a warm summer of 1976, and 23-year-old Elizabeth Plunkett left Ringsend in Dublin for a weekend with friends at a caravan in Brittas Bay. She laughed, partied, planned to swim, but that night she vanished. A tiny sandal found near the dunes didn't make headlines. No signal went out. No Amber Alerts or frantic searches, just quiet, creeping dread. It took just under 1 month before her remains washed ashore on Dunkermick Beach in Wexford, bound, weighted down, forgotten. And yet no inquest followed, no death certificate. For nearly 50 years, a young woman's life ended with silence, and her family buried that silence every single day. 23-year-old Elizabeth was more than a name in a case file. She was Kathleen and Bernadette's sister, their parents' daughter, and a bright soul full of plans. But after her disappearance, those plans were shattered in ways no family should ever endure. When Elizabeth vanished in late August 1976, her sisters immediately stepped into a relentless search, calling Gardaí, combing through pubs in Brittas Bay, and pleading for any scrap of information. It was heartbreaking, a family chasing shadows, their worry growing by the hour. Nearly 4 weeks later, their worst fears were confirmed. Elizabeth's body was found on Dunkermick Beach in Wexford, tied to a lawnmower, weighted down, left in the sea. She'd been raped, strangled, dehumanized in death, and discarded like refuse. But the cruelty didn't end there. There was no death certificate, no inquest, no acknowledgement from the state that their daughter had been brutally killed. It was a second tragedy, not just losing Elizabeth, but being ignored by the system meant to help them mourn and find justice. For the next 4 decades, the Plunkett family lived with that double loss, grieving Elizabeth's death and grieving the fact that no one ever said her name in court, no one took responsibility, and no one even marked her passing officially. John Shaw and Jeffrey Evans were dangerous, 2 English criminals who came to Ireland with a plan. In late 1976, they began a summer-long spree, terrorizing women across the country, and Elizabeth was caught in their deadly path. After Elizabeth disappeared from Brittas Bay, Gardaí pieced together a horrifying tale. Both Shaw and Evans admitted they stopped their car, pulled her inside, raped and strangled her. Then, in a final act of cruelty, they bound her body to a lawnmower, rode it into the sea, and left her to disappear into the waves. Their confession was chilling. Soon after, they did it again, abducting and murdering Mary Duffy in Galway later that month. That case went to trial, and they were both convicted. But for Elizabeth's murder, charges were dropped. The state decided not to prosecute. No trial, no verdict, nothing despite their confessions. For the Plunkett family, that decision was devastating. Their sister's killer walked free in that case without facing court. Fast forward to today, Evans died in prison in 2012. Shaw is still locked up, and he's Ireland's longest-serving prisoner. But he was never convicted for Elizabeth's murder, and that means Elizabeth's family has no legal standing as victims, no voice at parole hearings, no justice. Ireland's justice system had every piece it needed: 2 killers, a confession, and a body washed up on the shore. Yet it chose not to act. The director of public prosecutions quietly dropped the charges, operating under one cold assumption: John Shaw, already jailed for Mary Duffy's murder, would never walk free. No inquest, no inquiry, not even a death certificate until January 2025, barely a month ago, that finally ruled her death an unlawful killing. For nearly 50 years, Elizabeth had no official ruling on her fate. The institution that should have stood for her fell silent. Because there was never a charge, never a conviction, the Plunkett family was legally invisible. They couldn't participate in Shaw's parole hearings, weren't officially recognized as victims, and lacked the legal protections every family of a murdered loved one deserves. This wasn't a mistake. It was a failure of will, the kind of bureaucratic indifference that transforms cold cases into cold ashes. It wasn't a detective who broke the case open. It wasn't the Gardaí or the courts. It was a podcast. In early summer of 2025, Arte released Stolen Sister, a raw, unflinching deep dive into the life and death of Elizabeth Plunkett. This series retraced her final hours, the devastation left behind, and most importantly, the shocking silence that followed her murder. And for the first time in nearly 5 decades, Ireland listened. The podcast gave Elizabeth's family a voice. Her sisters, Kathleen and Bernadette, spoke publicly, sharing the agony of being ignored, dismissed, and legally erased. But what came next, no one expected. After the broadcast, 8 women stepped forward. 8, each with hauntingly similar stories, stalked by the same 2 men in that same terrible summer of 1976. Some barely escaped, others were attacked. These were not random acts. This was a pattern, and Elizabeth may not have been their only victim. Stolen Sister didn't just tell a story, it exposed a system. It revealed that because there was never a conviction in Elizabeth's case, her family had no legal right to participate in parole hearings or demand justice. That legal gap, hidden for nearly 50 years, was now in the spotlight. And suddenly, the cold case wasn't cold anymore. It was burning, and the country was watching. In mid-June 2025, after decades in the shadows, Elizabeth's voice echoed through Ireland's highest chamber, the Dáil. On June 18th, Labour leader Ivana Basic stood up, her words carrying both sorrow and rage. After 50 years, this family still waits for recognition. They were never victims in the eyes of the law. Her speech cut through political decorum. She called on the Taoiseach and Justice Minister Jim O'Callaghan to act, demanding a full cold case review, a retroactive inquest, and official victim status in parole proceedings. In the public gallery sat the Plunkett sisters, Kathleen, Bernadette, watching as cries for justice became legislative pressure. The state could no longer look away. In that moment, the system cracked but didn't yet shatter. The Taoiseach acknowledged the wrongs, promising government support. He urged the Justice Minister to meet with the family and ensure the Gardaí and DPP reopened Elizabeth's case. No more excuses, no more waiting. The message was clear. Ireland had a reckoning coming. Elizabeth's death was no longer a footnote. It was a national failure, and it was time to make it right. This isn't the end of the story, it's the turning point. Even after Elizabeth's name echoed in the Dáil, the fight for true justice is just beginning. First, a cold case review must be launched by the Gardaí. That means re-examining evidence from 1976, interviewing the 8 women who came forward, seeing if forensic advances can now uncover what was missing or mishandled decades ago. Second, there must be legal reform on victim recognition. Because Shaw was never convicted, the Plunkett family hasn't had any voice at parole hearings. These sisters should be granted official victim status with rights to attend hearings, challenge decisions, and demand transparency. Third, the state needs a retroactive inquest and proper death certification. The fact that Elizabeth's death wasn't legally acknowledged until January 2025 is a stark indictment. An inquest would finally document what happened legally, historically, symbolically. Why it matters. This isn't just about one family's pain. It's about every hidden victim. Cold case victims whose justice rusted away in bureaucracy. Families kept on the sidelines because legal technicalities blocked their voice. A country that once ignored the worst of summer 76 and must never look away again. The bigger picture. Elizabeth's case is rewriting the rules. It could set a precedent in Ireland mandating victim rights even when prosecutions never happened. It could spark a wave of reviews on other forgotten cases from the 70s, 80s, and beyond. It sends a clear message. Justice delayed is not justice denied, but it demands action. As the sisters step forward, not as passive bystanders, but as tireless advocates, they force the system to catch up and not settle until Elizabeth's death is legally recognized, investigated, and laid to rest in truth. It took 50 years for a family's voice to echo from the cliffs of Brittas Bay to the heights of the Dáil. Now the country has a choice to act or to let another voice be lost in the silence.